I thought I'd do a reading tonight, another chapter from the book that I read from the last time, Uncommon Wisdom, the life and teachings of Ajahn Panyawado, author being one of his students, Ajahn Dick Silaratno. And thought I'd maybe shift a little bit from the body, which we've been concentrating on quite a bit, and move into this reading, this chapter on feeling, Vedana, which is the second of the Satipatthana sections. Yeah, the contemplation of feeling. So it'll become more clear as we go along in here. But feeling, as probably most of you know, refers not to feeling as often we use in the general English language, like either meaning the feeling, sensation or tactile sensation, or the kind of feeling like emotional feeling, my feelings emotionally, but more refers to what I think probably a slightly better translation would be feeling tone. And it's a quality of experience that pretty much comes with any form of contact with the sensory world, sight, sounds, taste, smells, tactile sensations, and the realm of thoughts as well, all have with them, as they arise into experience, they all have with them a feeling tone of either pleasant, unpleasant, or sometimes the more literal translation would be neither pleasant nor unpleasant, or neither unpleasant nor pleasant, sometimes shortened to neutral. Even if they're very subtle forms of that kind of feeling tone, every experience that we have through those sense bases has a certain feeling quality to it, a feeling tone quality, and the Buddha has designated it as a satipatthana because it's very important, which will become evident as I read, very important in delineating where it is that our craving, attachment lies. It follows the pleasant, tries to get rid of the unpleasant, and is generally confused by everything else. So it's a very important tool for bringing our mindfulness into that arena, because it will point out to us it's where we start to get lost in craving, which, as we know, is the root cause of suffering. So without further ado, feeling. Craving is the root cause of attachment. Because of that, to free your mind of attachment, you must go directly to tanha, or craving, and eliminate that. If you overcome craving, you'll overcome attachments. But you cannot deal with the attachments directly. Trying to overcome attachments by sheer determination or willpower won't work. The only way to overcome attachments is to get rid of their cause, which is craving. This is stated clearly in Paticca Samuppada, or dependent origination. Quote, dependent on feeling, craving arises. Dependent on craving, attachment or clinging arises. Craving becomes the condition for attachment. When craving is destroyed, attachment cannot arise. Because craving is dependent on feeling, when you aim to destroy craving, you have to first focus your attention on feeling. This is a critical point, because exactly at the juncture between feeling and craving, you can place a barrier. Feeling is just feeling. It is the result of past karma, whereas the tanha is new karma. So by allowing the two to link up, you are creating more karma. If you can turn away at that juncture and prevent that new karma from occurring, the situation gradually improves. But Paticca Samuppada does not give a practical guidance on how to do that. It reveals how the process unfolds, but it does not indicate the way to unravel the entanglement. In order to unravel it, you must learn to find the feeling. Examine feeling and see how feeling gives rise to tanha. And there's a couple of pages where he talks about Paticca Samuppada in a more general sense and analyzes several of the steps. And he points out that it can be very complicated and confusing, and then apologizes sort of, and then goes ahead and does it. And I think, it was a valiant attempt, but for me it was confusing. It was confusing. So I'm going to skip it. and just move on to more of the part where he then settles into the more specific comments about tanha, and you can read it for yourself. Phassa, which is contact in the dependent origination sequence. Phassa gives rise to Vedana, so contact gives rise to feeling. That is, sense contact conditions the arising of feeling. In the context of paticca-samuppada, the arising of feeling is a resultant process that is caused by consequences of actions done in the past coming up in the present. The feeling may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feeling is a condition for tanha, or craving, to arise. Based on feeling, a personal emotional judgment is made as to whether a feeling is considered pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which leads directly to a craving for the pleasant, an aversion for the unpleasant, and a dull indifference towards the neutral. In other words, there is a tendency to react with either greed, aversion, or delusion. These reactions are all aspects of the kilesas, with feeling as their condition. Feeling arises, and then the kilesas arise. For example, you hear a sound you don't like. Based on that sensation, an unpleasant feeling arises. The unpleasant feeling is a feeling of aversion. Thus, aversion arises dependent on circumstances. Feeling is experienced first, and if we don't like it, that feeling then brings up aversion. Because that feeling is dukkha, a desire to suppress it arises. The tendency then is to search for scapegoats. You try to find something like another person or a sound or the heat or whatever. You straightaway blame something like that for the unpleasant feeling. Then the anger goes out to that. This reaction is quite wrong because that anger generates a lot of thought, and that thought is kamma. That kamma will revert back to you later and produce the feeling again. But the feeling of aversion isn't the emotion of aversion. There's no aversion in feeling. It becomes aversion when you start thinking, criticizing, blaming, and so on. That's where the trouble comes, in the thinking. Feeling is a result of the past, but when you think, that thinking is kamma. So it's the thoughts that keep the anger going. It's there in paticca-samuppada. Dependent on phassa, the contact of sensation, feeling arises. Dependent on the arising of feeling, craving arises. So the craving comes dependent on feeling. But the feeling is a result of the past, so it's just something you have to put up with. Whereas thought is tanha, the craving to get rid of that unpleasant feeling, which is the making of new kamma. Tanha has two aspects, craving to have pleasant feelings and craving not to have unpleasant feelings. Craving, in turn, gives rise to either attachment, clinging is often how it's translated, upadana. Craving, in turn, gives rise to either attachment to pleasant experiences or distaste for unpleasant ones, which is the reverse side of attachment. Because of habitual emotional patterns, we usually get caught by feeling when it arises, and immediately up comes tanha, the craving. The only way to overcome that is to learn the method of going inward to investigate feeling. Suppose in the past you have been angry, and that anger triggers the arising of feeling in the present. That feeling is a feeling of imbalance. Your mind is out of balance. Feeling out of balance, you try to restore a sense of equilibrium within. If the cause is anger, the habitual response is to blame something or someone. If the cause is greed, the response is to go out searching for sense gratification. These are the normal ways that the kilesas seek balance. Instead of restoring equilibrium, the kilesas become the causes of more defiled actions. When those actions bring results, the consequences of those actions then act as a fertile ground for more defilements. In other words, seeking balance in defiled actions creates more kamma, which only makes the imbalance worse because the consequences rebound back to you later on. In this way, the round of rebirths continues to revolve without end. As long as ignorance and defilements are calling the shots, kamma will continue to bring results and suffering will continue to accumulate. Only when ignorance and craving are destroyed will the chain of dependent origination be broken and the end of suffering be reached. To summarize in reverse order, attachment depends on craving. Craving depends on feeling. Feeling depends on sense contact. Sense contact depends on having the sense bases, which in turn depends on having mind and body. Mind and body depend on vijnana, which arises due to the ignorance that produced the kamma, leading to all the conditions for birth, aging, sickness, and death. The point where we can have the greatest impact in breaking this cycle of birth and death is at the nexus between feeling, craving, and attachment. It is there that we can start unraveling paticca-samuppada. Feeling is a critical link in the chain of dependent origination because it is between feeling and craving that you can erect a barrier to prevent the evolution of the process. It's at this juncture between feeling and craving that we have an option to either accept or reject the kilesas. Craving's reaction to the arising of feeling is not predetermined. The arising of feeling simply means that the conditions are present for activating the kilesas. Whether the kilesas spring into action at that point or not depends on our state of mind. The kilesas don't have to become active. We have the option of accepting or rejecting them. That's where our freedom of will comes in. It comes in at the juncture where feeling conditions craving. When we do that, we start to dismantle paticca-samuppada until we reach the cessation of suffering. So let's examine feeling. Feeling is a result of past kamma. Feeling is based upon something that we've seen, heard, smelled, tasted, touched, or thought in the past. If we examine it, we'll see that the feeling is just based on a form or a sound or a smell or a taste or a contact or a thought. That's all. But because of memory, we then associate that sensation with some past experience. If the experience was pleasant, we like it. If unpleasant, we don't. And because we associate it with something in memory, a reaction takes place. We want it if it's pleasant. We don't want it if it's unpleasant. So when some object is presented to us through any of the senses, which we either like or dislike, we should try to notice the accompanying feeling, the feeling of attraction or repulsion, and how the tendency is to react with either greed or aversion. It is the reaction that's important. The feeling arises down in the heart region, and the reaction arises down there too. But the reaction is often supported by a lot of thinking, which is up in the head. Feelings are results of kamma from the past, which is felt as pleasant or unpleasant, good or bad. When pleasant kamma comes up, it brings a feeling of, I want that, which is triggered by greed. When aversion comes up, it triggers the response of, I don't want this feeling, I want to reject it. In trying to reject the feeling, we may think, oh, it was that person's fault, he did it, he caused this unpleasantness. So we make excuses and think critical, angry thoughts. Those angry thoughts are the reaction to the feeling. When angry thoughts come up, they are a form of present kamma that tends to bring up the same feeling in the future when something triggers it. So when watching feeling, it is important to pay close attention to the reaction that feeling brings about when something sets it off. That's where we can easily go astray. For example, feeling may be set up through the senses. We hear a sound or we see or smell something, and that will bring up a memory from the past. That past situation comes up in the present as a feeling similar to the one in the past. We then react to it in the same way we did then, thus making the same type of kamma which set up the feeling originally. So the wheel goes rolling on, round and round. Usually the contact and the feeling arise so quickly that we have great difficulty in distinguishing them. Contact giving rise to feeling takes place so fast that it is almost impossible to separate them. So it's difficult to see that distinction. But feeling is the important factor to look at. We know that feeling comes from contact. Normally the contact is automatic. It takes place without any deliberation. Following that contact, feeling arises. It's a resultant process that is caused by consequences of actions done in the past coming up in the present. When that happens, mindfulness should be focused on watching the feeling, to make sure that a negative reaction does not take place. In other words, when it's an unpleasant feeling, we tell ourselves, this unpleasantness is my own fault, is a result of my own karma. I've got to put up with it. We must always avoid blaming someone else. The feeling of aversion is an unpleasant feeling. We must learn to turn inwards and look at that feeling. If we can turn inwards and look at it, we won't let it escape and turn into bad thoughts. So we defeat the kilesas at that point. Mind you, we only defeat them a little bit at a time. To get rid of aversion completely, we'll probably have to do it many times until it gradually goes. To accomplish that, we must look within ourselves to find out where these feelings are, and we must discover what sort of feelings give rise to what sort of mental states. It is very important in meditation practice to look for feeling, to get to know it, particularly feeling in the solar plexus region, because when we're upset in one way or another, it's always felt down there. Maybe. And it's always there that the kilesas, the defilements, originate. Thoughts, speech, or actions that follow the lead of the defilements create karma. The karma that results will come back to us as feeling in the future, starting the cycle rolling again. When we short-circuit the whole process at the link between feeling and craving, the momentum will slowly lessen and the offending defilements will gradually die away, bit by bit. The benefits won't appear suddenly. Old habits don't die easily. But with persistence, over time they can be reformed. What's important is developing the good habit of being mindful of feelings as they arise and assessing their potential danger to us. It's almost like seeing a red flag come up, warning us to be vigilant. We immediately turn inward, then thinking, I mustn't let this get out of hand. This is a fundamental part of the training in sense restraint. So the way to deal with feelings is not so much a matter of deliberately not reacting to them, but rather one of being mindful of them. When we are mindful, not reacting will take place automatically. Mindfulness is a kind of monitor that checks what's going on without interfering with it. With mindfulness, we sometimes feel like we are standing back and watching the feelings, as though from a back seat inside somewhere. Observing from that back seat, we can clearly see what's happening, but we don't interfere in any way. Pleasant and painful feelings are just happening, and that's all. It's that sort of attention that is required. So pay close attention to feelings. When unpleasant feelings arise, examine them at the point where they occur. Don't let those feelings turn into thoughts about blaming others. Think only about the feeling, not other people. In other words, if you keep the mind inside, no harm is done. Trouble comes only when you let it escape out into thought, speech, or action. By allowing the mind to go out and blame things externally, you make karma. And that karma comes back to you in the future in the form of the same sort of feeling. So the wheel just keeps spinning. If you don't learn to correct this recurring cycle, you will never get free from it. To correct it, you must do the right thing by not letting the mind go out. You must focus inward every time, to look at those unpleasant feelings and accept them. Accept that this is your own fault. Because you have done unwholesome acts, unpleasant feelings are arising as a result. When you accept that it's your fault and don't let your attention go outward, then that debt is paid and your difficulties become a little bit less. Each time you do it, they are reduced. Through that, you find a certain joy and contentment arising within. You feel happy. That happiness is a result of the work you've done, because you have learned how to cure the defilements to some extent. The more you go on in this way, the more you feel buoyant and light. This result points out the right direction. It shows that you are taking the correct path. The more you experience happiness, the more you know that you're headed in the right direction. The kilesas come up because of feeling. Feeling is the goad which arouses them. So if you can put a barrier between the feeling and the craving, you stop the kilesas, and they can't become active. By being aware of the kilesas, you can see them when they come up and not react to them. Because they come up in connection with certain feelings, you know that particular feelings are the conditions for the arising of particular kilesas. When that feeling comes up, you know that certain kilesas are lurking in the background. So keep a watch out. Keep the mindfulness strong. If you watch that process, the kilesas don't get a foothold, and the mind naturally calms down and becomes peaceful. Okay. I thought I'd also do a few passages from a sutta. It's one of my favorite suttas, the Chula Vedala Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, number 40 through 44. And I won't read the whole sutta, but just the section that's pertinent to Vedana, to feeling tone. And just a brief background on this sutta. It's a conversation between the bhikkhuni Dhammadina and the layman Visakha, who, according to the footnotes from the commentary, they were actually married early in their lives, and then she took ordination and became an arahant, and he remained as a lay follower, but according to the commentaries, at this point of the conversation, he was a non-returner, I think, or a non-returner. So it's a conversation between the two of them, him asking her questions. So he asks a bunch of questions early on about identity view and different attainments and concentration and all sorts of things. And then we get to this section on feeling, and he addresses her. Lady, how many kinds of feeling are there? Friend Visakha, there are 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. But lady, what is pleasant feeling? What is painful feeling? What is neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, whatever is felt bodily or mentally as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as neither soothing nor hurting is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, what is pleasant and what is painful in regard to pleasant feeling? What is painful and what is pleasant in regard to painful feeling? What is pleasant and what is painful in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists, and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it persists, and pleasant when it changes. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge of it, and painful when there is no knowledge of it. So that's an important one to take in. I just really appreciate that perspective, particularly on the neutral feeling, that it's pleasant when it's known that there's an actual sensation, or not sensation, but experience of pleasantness when neutral feeling is when you're aware of it. So that's the awareness that is actually a pleasant state of mind. And painful when there's ignorance, when there's no knowledge of it, which is inherently an unpleasant state of mind. Okay, so that's one section. Then we're moving on to another section called underlying tendencies. Lady, what underlying tendency underlies pleasant feeling? What underlying tendency underlies painful feeling? What underlying tendency underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust underlies pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion underlies painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust underlie all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion underlie all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, what should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, the underlying tendency to lust does not have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Here, friend Visakha, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. With that, he abandons lust, and the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie that. Here a bhikkhu considers thus: when shall I enter upon and abide in that base that the noble ones now enter upon and abide in? In one who thus generates a longing for the supreme liberation, grief arises with that longing as condition. With that, he abandons aversion, and the underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie that. Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. With that, he abandons ignorance, and the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie that. And then the final section, called counterparts. Lady, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? I'm going to read the footnote on that, because the word counterpart is a bit confusing, especially when he starts to give examples, or she starts to give examples. The word counterpart, this is the footnote, the word counterpart, patibhaga, is used to express the relationships of both opposition and supplementation. So it can be either something that accompanies and comes along with the feeling, or is an opposite of it. So it's something that's in association with the particular aspect that he's asking about. So, lady, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Friend Visakha, painful feeling is the counterpart of pleasant feeling. So that in this case, it's the opposite. Painful feeling is the counterpart of pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of painful feeling? Pleasant feeling is the counterpart of painful feeling. What is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Ignorance is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So that's one where there's in supplementation rather than in opposition. The counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling, ignorance. What is the counterpart of ignorance? True knowledge is the counterpart of ignorance. What is the counterpart of true knowledge? Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. What is the counterpart of deliverance? Nibbana is the counterpart of deliverance. Lady, what is the counterpart of Nibbana? Friend Visakha, you have pushed this line of questioning too far. You are not able to grasp the limit to questions. For the holy life, friend Visakha, is grounded upon Nibbana, culminates in Nibbana, ends in Nibbana. If you wish, friend Visakha, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this. As the Blessed One explains it to you, so you should remember it. Then the conclusion here, then the lay follower of Visakha, having delighted and rejoiced in the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina's words, rose from his seat, and after paying homage to her, keeping her on his right, he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told the Blessed One his entire conversation with the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina. When he finished speaking, the Blessed One told him, "The Bhikkhuni Dhammadina is wise, Visakha. The Bhikkhuni Dhammadina has great wisdom. If you would ask me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina has explained it. Such is the meaning, and so you should remember it." So that is what the Blessed One said. The lay follower of Visakha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Concludes the readings for tonight. On feeling tone, comments, questions?
Thank you for the reading, Ajahn. Just for clarification, so Vedana means feeling tone, but will each feeling normally accompany some sort of physical sensation? So you have an unpleasant feeling tone, will there generally be a location in the body where that's felt, or can it be purely mental or purely bodily? I just wanted some clarification on that.
Good question. Yeah, for the most part, as a human being, we will experience some aspect of a bodily experience. We'll have a bodily experience in regards to a feeling tone. There are, purely mental experiences that a being can have, even considering that sometimes beings are mental-only bodies, and there's still experience at that level, and there's still feeling tone at that level. So there may not even be a body, in some of those super-duper high realms. So there are, clearly feelings that arise from mental experience as well as physical experience, the pleasant or the unpleasant or the neutral. And in my experience anyway, in most situations, even with mental experience, mental contact, moods like anger or lust or whatever it is, desire, there will be a physical component to it, and that's the easiest place to read it. It's pretty hardwired in the body for the mental component and the bodily components to be in contact with each other. And I find that the best avenue to approach it, to feel it, to actually feel it and know it is in the body. But it's not exclusively that way all the time.
One of the things that can be confusing is there's been that sort of widespread, at least expression that it's a sensation, it's just a sensation, and there's tiny little sensations, and you're just feeling these tiny little sensations all over your body. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant, some are neutral. And then that's sort of what's taken as what the experience. So I appreciated in both readings, and as you were talking about it, not actually referring to sensation.
Tactile sensation.
Yeah,
that has a whole different Pali word.
Yeah, and so the nice thing about the word is it has the word. We use the word tone, and it has there's a feeling tone to our experience, like whatever it is. So, and I was thinking about like with mental, it's like if you have a very painful memory and you're just remembering that memory, it can manifest in the body, but it can also just be there stored in your mind. But I just found that steering as much away from that word sensation, because it kind of creates like what I'm searching for in my body are these like little points of pleasant and unpleasant, and I'm not sure if that's actually kind of really what we're talking about with the khandhas and how we understand our own experience. So it's a good thing to explore. And then the other thing is like the subtlety that it was talked about is also important, is that it's not necessarily something that's so easy to catch, and we might be assuming that we're understanding it when it isn't always in the realm of like kind of being able to grasp it so easily. So I think it takes a certain amount of attention and clear-mindedness to experience that. Whereas I think more in the sankhara realm, perception sankhara realm, is something that tends to be a little bit easier to observe. But yeah, those are some things I was
sure.
Seeing.
It just brings to mind too. I've never trained in the Goenka tradition or been to any retreats. I think some here have, and I'm not 100% sure if I'm accurate in relating this. But when I've talked to some Goenka practitioners, it seems to me that what I've heard them say, if I'm not incorrect, is that Goenka often does use the word Vedana, referring to the physical sensation and also the quality of feeling tone associated with that physical sensation, but seems to emphasize a lot of the practice, that particular technique of scanning through the body and examining Vedana, but using that word particularly in relation to physical sensation. So if you've been trained in that way, you may have a conditioning to, when you hear the word Vedana, to think physical sensation. But at least in my understanding from how the Buddha presents it, it's broader than that. I mean, physical sensation does have its own forms of Vedana associated with it because it's a form of contact. But so do all the other experiences of body and mind, as we've been talking about.
Thank you for the reading. Did Ajahn Panyavado say that all thought is tanha?
I don't recall that he said all thought is tanha. No, he wouldn't have said that because it isn't.
Okay.
Thought can be, crafted in a very skillful way as a reflective tool to guide one's attention in the right direction, away from tanha. Actually, it's how you use it.
Maybe it was all thought is karma. I don't know. I think he said something about all thought, and I was like, what?
He could have. I don't, have the whole chapter memorized enough to be able to go right back to it. All thought is kamma, which makes sense, yeah. Okay. Because kamma is, action with intention, the intention, and thought is a sankhara, an actively based sankhara is a formation that is produced with intention and therefore will have a result. Any form of action with intention, body, speech, or mind, will have some sort of result karmically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, just the word karma is just the verb to do. It doesn't have all of the trappings of the law of karma or the workings of karma or the entanglements of karma. It's all it is karma as a word is the verb to do. And so whatever we do by body, speech, or mind has a result.
So Ajahn, when in the sutta, when Dhammadina says that there's the arising of grief and that's an unpleasant feeling that isn't conditioned by aversion or isn't associated with aversion. I was wondering if you could expand on the meaning of that and what that grief is with regard to that which one has not attained on the path.
Yeah, it's a very nice reference. And I think it refers to the, that there's also, I think somewhere else it's mentioned that there are two kinds of feeling, worldly and unworldly. And most of the time what we're talking about, stuff that causes craving to arise. Craving is an unhealthy kind of form of desire, of wanting. It's in relation to worldly pleasant feeling or worldly unpleasant feeling. Takes us in the direction of, usually the physical senses wanting some sort of gratification or wanting to get away from some sort of unpleasant experience and come in through the senses. Unworldly pleasant feeling is just that feeling of, when will I when will I be able to see the results of this? I've practiced so hard and I put so much time into it and I've committed my life to it, and I still haven't realized the fruits of this practice. When will I be able to experience? It's an unpleasant feeling, but it's an unpleasant feeling with a skillful motivation that then sets the stage for its own ending of that. Because if you follow that and use that in a very skillful way to propel you on and to keep you going and to keep exploring and trying different things to get the right result in the best way with the best intention, then the result will eventually be the realization that then leads to that ending of that unpleasant feeling. So all unpleasant feeling doesn't need to be, dealt with in terms of eradication. It needs to be used properly. And similarly with the pleasant feeling of, the pleasant feeling that comes from skillful application of the mind, as in the development of composure of mind, samadhi, those kinds of things. That's a blameless form of pleasure, as the Buddha calls it. Okay, it's almost 10 till 7, so call it an evening.